Good evening, everybody. Owen from Even Star here. I hope you are all having a great week. It's hump day and hump day is nearly over. So for those of us who don't work on the weekend, that doesn't include me, by the way, it's nearly the weekend again. And I'm pretty sure there's a full moon coming up, but I needed to check that. Anyway, let's get on to topic. So today I wanted to talk about misconceptions about miscarriage. Hi, Sue. I am going to try to not shout out to people again because I just get too distracted, but love you all who join me live and those people who watch the video later. Thank you very much. Appreciate your support. So miscarriage. So in this week after Mother's Day, I felt really strongly that I wanted to talk about all those situations where you can't actually become a mother necessarily immediately when you want to. All those situations where you might have something go wrong with a pregnancy or even during a birth, and that results in your pregnancy not bringing forth that beautiful living bubba that you so much wanted. So this is something that I have had personal experience with. So I guess it's a bit of a personal story for me, which I don't often do on my Facebook Lives. But many of you know I have two boys now who are 12 and 15. But before I had my oldest son, I had two miscarriages. And then I had another one in between. And in all situations, I was lucky, I guess, because they were very early. For the first two, I was actually overseas, which was a bit tricky, especially for the second one, because my husband at the time was all the way back in Australia for work when I was in the UK having a miscarriage. But luckily my brother and my beautiful sister-in-law were in the UK and they came to be with me. But really my point in why I wanted to talk about this is basically that we don't talk about it enough as a society. These things just get swept under the carpet and it's not talked about. And I did hear, just when I'd written this, the piece for my blog, which is basically what I'm talking about in the video, I just listened to one of Yumi Stein's podcasts, her Ladies We Need to Talk, which if you haven't heard it, I would highly, highly recommend. And she did a podcast about miscarriage, but her byline, I guess, was about the 12-week rule and how, you know, everybody thinks they can't tell anybody other than those really close to them that they're pregnant until that 12-week scan has been done. And that, you know, this therefore means that, again, it's the same thing I'm talking about, that then if something goes wrong, then you're living with this grief on your own and without anybody to really be open with about it. And it's very much a kind of a taboo subject, I think. And we really need to break that brule. I've used that word in my little intro if you saw it at the side or wherever it appears on your screen, which is a great word that I love from Mindvalley, which is basically a bullshit rule, a brule that we need to get over in our culture, I think. So really what I wanted to say was that when you have this kind of situation, you are really suffering a grief, and it doesn't matter now, although I said that I was lucky my miscarriages were really early, doesn't matter how long it was. You have loved that child ever since that little soul chose you and decided to implant in your womb. That is my belief anyway. And it doesn't matter how long the pregnancy went on for, you are going to experience grief at that loss. And that is really hard when you're basically nobody or most people around you don't know that you're going on with that grief. Now, the other big thing I think is that you also feel like a failure as a woman. You have failed the most basic test of your femininity, that you can't have a child at that point. Doesn't mean you never will necessarily. So I think that's something that women very much internalise and deal with on their own. And again, is something that if we could actually talk about it a bit more and support each other, especially through it, then that would be really healthy for everybody. And then the third point, the third negative emotion that you have to deal with when you're in this situation is also then the resentment that you feel for all of a sudden all the other hundreds of women that you see around you who are pregnant or have their beautiful little baby or their children in the park, or you catch the eye of some glowingly beautiful woman walking along the street with her big fat belly, and once again that grief and that feeling of failure absolutely slaps you in the face. That was certainly what I experienced anyway. And I, from the little information out there in the media about this, I don't think that that's uncommon at all. And I think that really, unless you have experienced that kind of thing yourself or something of that kind, so there's also, of course, stillbirth. There's problems with babies being lost at birth, which happened to a very good friend of mine. And we really, people can't empathise, or they can, but only to a certain extent if they haven't experienced it. So I think for anybody who's out there who has experienced this kind of a loss, then it's really important to reach out to others who are going through it at the time. So I do have many clients who come to me to help them get through some kind of a loss. So, a lot of the time it's a broken relationship, or somebody in their family or close to them has died, and this kind of loss is no different. So Reiki is really, really beneficial for dealing with grief, because it's all about balancing and releasing negative energy. And even if you don't want to talk about it, or even if you don't necessarily understand the full impact of the emotions that you're feeling, the Reiki is going to help you balance those emotions out. So that's what I love about it. You don't actually have to talk. People don't have to come and talk about everything that's going on for them. And a lot of the time they don't actually understand the full depth of it anyway. So Reiki is going to work for them anyway. And it is really wonderful for that kind of thing. So the chakras, so the energy centers that we'd work with mainly would be definitely your heart chakra, because that's really all about letting go of things that no longer serve you. And the other point actually I wanted to make was that really you do need to allow yourself to go through that grief. So that's the whole problem, is that you can't really talk about it. People don't know what's going on for you, but you actually need to give yourself time to sit with that grief for a period of time. There are 5 stages of grief, going all the way from denial through to acceptance, with anger and a lot of other nasty things in the middle. But yeah, you do need to be allowed and to allow yourself to feel that grief and to experience that grief. But what we don't want is to get stuck in a negative cycle of grief. I do have another blog about that, and I'll put a link to it in the comments below when I'm finished. So yeah, so heart chakra, once we're at the stage where we do want to release grief, then that's what we want to work on. And I've got a tips sheet about that available as well, if anybody wants that information for themselves. Also then, your solar plexus is all about your self-perception, your self-confidence. So that whole thing about feeling like a failure is going to mean that we really want to work on our solar plexus as well. Second chakra as well, so our sacral chakra, which is our sexual energy center, and our ability to feel joy and passion is going to be something that we need to get balanced, and certainly influences hormones a lot as well. So I've had lots of clients who might come and see me for whatever reason, and one of the things they're experiencing is irregular periods, or they really want to get pregnant, and then after a Reiki session or two, amazingly that missing period or that pregnancy, if that's what they want, comes into line. So that's really nice. And then also the other one is of course your first chakra, so your root connection to the earth, which is from where all life stems, and that is a really important one to have balance as well when we're dealing with these kind of issues. And it's also about support, and you're going to want to feel supported through the whole process and to be able to move on and potentially try to become pregnant again. But obviously you can't spend your life in a Reiki studio, unfortunately, unless you want to become a Reiki practitioner, which I'd highly recommend as well. So I did want to just also mention some essential oils, which are going to be really supportive. So as I always say, your essential oils are going to carry on working on all the different energetic levels of your body, and especially amazing for emotional and mental support, which is why I recommend them to go along with Reiki, and even instead of Reiki, if Reiki is not your thing, to help you get through anything, to help you get through life, basically. So I've got a few that I wanted to mention. So black pepper. So black pepper is great for any kind of grief because it helps us to move from denial to acceptance. So, which is basically the process of grief, and an acceptance that imperfection is part of life. Lang Lang, which is another beautiful oil for grief support, and because this one helps us to move from anger to moving to mindfulness, to being in the moment again and not having all that negative thinking back to what could have been and what might have been and if only, and allows you to have gratitude for what you have. Jasmine, beautiful, sweet fragrance, which we all know in summer in Australia, and that helps us to move from feeling fearful to trusting again. So trusting yourself to be able to have a successful pregnancy the next time, and opening you up to the wisdom of the universe, which is there to support you through anything in life. Rose or geranium. So both rose and geranium are quite similar in their chemical constituents that make up their active ingredients. Rose is sometimes difficult to get, very expensive, so I often do use geranium instead. So they help us from moving from feeling isolated, disconnected from everybody else, to feeling again like you are supported and you have a sense of being loved and in tune with everybody else around you. Sage is very much about that supporting wisdom, so moving to a point of wisdom and acceptance of collective consciousness, and moving away from that asking why me, why did this happen to me, what did I do wrong. So really moving away from the self to the collective wisdom. And then clary sage is one I've spoken about. I think I've just done posts about clary sage being great for female hormonal balance. And it's actually very calming because it acts on our cortisol production. So it's a good one when you're feeling uncalm or there's a lot going on in your household. And again, is good for probably the later stages of grief, because it helps us to move from that feeling of stagnancy, of sitting in that negative cycle of grief, to having clarity and being able to move forward. So as with oils, all the time I would say use them aromatically in your diffuser or your burner. Put them on a hanky or a pillow or something so you can breathe in that aroma, and that's how they can be so wonderfully active upon our brain. You can apply them topically. Make sure you use a carrier oil or sorbeline, especially if you have sensitive skin. So a really good place to put oils in this kind of situation is to put them actually in that middle spot. So the inside of your elbow, there's a good meridian point to use there. And the other place, of course, would be on your second chakra, would be my recommended chakra for applying the oils. So that is just a few centimetres above your pubic bone. Rub the oil on in clockwise direction, and you can also apply them to anywhere that you feel you're holding that grief or that tension or that sense of not being good enough, or any of those other negative emotions that you might be feeling. Okay, I think I've gabbled on enough for tonight. If you have any questions, you want any more information, please let me know. Thank you so much for joining me live. For those of you who did, and for those of you who didn't, I hope you enjoyed the video anyway. And I will put links to all those things that I have mentioned in the comments below. And I hope you have a lovely evening and a beautiful sleep. Good night. Be well. Bye.